is Senator Menendez.
Thank you. It's great to be here with the Bayshore Democrats. I wanted Frank to continue and take all my time. The way it was going, I wish my mom was alive to hear it. So let me first say I'm thrilled to be here with the Bayshore Democrats. I know that we are going to storm Monmouth and bring democracy back to Monmouth this November. You've got some great candidates here for county offices, but I'll tell you, after serving nearly 20 years between the House, 14 years, and the last 6 or so in the Senate, I have seen a lot of colleagues. You have one of the premier members of the House of Representatives who represents not only you, but our interest in New Jersey, making sure that future generations of New Jerseyans and Americans are able to have the quality of life, the educational opportunity, the economic opportunity to help realize their hopes and dreams and aspirations. And there isn't anyone more tenacious in making that happen than Frank Pallone. He is a fantastic member of the House of Representatives, and we're thrilled to have him at our side. I want to recognize the chairman for nearly a quarter of a century of, it sounds a long time, Chairman, of service to our party. And, you know, it's different. If you are the Hudson County Democratic Chairman, that's one thing. Or the Essex County Democratic Chairman, that's another thing. Being the Monmouth County Democratic Chairman is a challenge. It is a commitment. It is a belief in a party and its principles and what it does for people. And Vic Scuderi has done it with an exemplary integrity and an exemplary commitment. So we are all indebted to you for those 23 years, Vic. Thank you very much. And to Michael and Bill and Kevin, I'm looking forward to work with you. We are not ceding any place of New Jersey in this election. That includes Monmouth County, and we will be here often along the way making a case. Tremendous opportunities here, and I want to talk about both what we as Democrats nationally have done, what it means for us here in New Jersey, why we should be proud to talk to any one of our neighbors or friends or families or those who we work or worship with about our party and what it has done and what it has meant to our state and to our country, and to hopefully have you proselytize others to do the same. You know, I never forget a moment in time which for me was an extraordinary moment in nearly 38 years of public service since I began at the age of 20 on the school board. And if you calculate, you can figure how old I am. You know, in September of 2008, as a member of the Senate Banking Committee, as well as a member of the Senate Finance Committee, I got called to a meeting with the Chairman of the Federal Reserve of the United States, Ben Bernanke, and the Secretary of the Treasury under Secretary Paulson. And members of that banking committee and members of the Senate leadership were called to a meeting, an extraordinary meeting, in which Chairman Bernanke outlined a series of financial institutions that were on the verge of collapse. Said if they collapsed, they would create systemic risk to the entire country's economy, and every American would feel the consequences of it. And the room was pretty hushed. And then he went on to recite a series of actions he wanted the Congress to take. And I remember being one of the first members to be able to ask a question in the Q&A, and I said, Mr. Chairman, surely you must have enough monetary tools at the Federal Reserve to get us through this period of time, because what you're asking us to do in terms of scope and size and immediacy is unprecedented. And he looked at me and he said the most incredible thing I've ever heard in my public service. He looked at me and he said, Senator, with all due respect, if you and your colleagues do not act in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will have, his words, not mine, a global financial meltdown. And the room was pretty aghast. And I said, a global financial meltdown, that would mean a new depression. And he said, if we allow it to happen, that's what it will mean. Stock markets will pancake across the globe, there'll be a run on the banks, and we will have a depression far beyond what the nation lived under Roosevelt. Now, whatever you might think of Chairman Bernanke's economic policies, the one thing you have to know about him is that his PhD is in Depression-era economics. How the nation got into the last Depression, what worked and didn't work in terms of getting out of it. So when he said this, it was very, very telling. And I tell that story because that is September of 2008, before we had an election in November of 2008, before Barack Obama took the oath of office in late January of 2009. And what we as Democrats inherited in this country, as I'm sure you will inherit it in Monmouth County when you take a majority, is the reality of excesses that create challenges for the future. This president, at the end of January of 2009, unemployment was already at 7.5%. People forget that. When he took the oath of office, unemployment was already at 7.5%. We had lost millions of jobs in 2008. And by the time he took the oath of office at the end of January of 2009, we had lost 750,000 jobs in January. In February, as he's trying to put a cabinet together, we lost another 750,000 jobs. In March, when he finally sends a program to the Congress to try to stimulate our economy and move our economy forward from one that was going red and losing millions of jobs, he lost another 750,000 jobs. In the first quarter of 2009, before the president and Democrats could act, we had lost 2.1 million jobs. And we had 2 wars raging abroad in Iraq and Afghanistan, one that we should have never been in, the one I voted against in Iraq, which we should never have sent our sons and daughters to and spent billions of dollars on. And we had a Wall Street that, instead of being a free market, which I believe in, was a free-for-all market, where excesses of large entities became the collective risk of all of us as Americans. That's what Democrats inherited in 2009. And we have gone from that moment. I always start at a reference point because we have to get our neighbors and friends to just, this is just the truth. We're not fabricating this. Some of you, if you look at the HBO movie Too Big to Fail, well, the scene that I described to you, although mine is more vivid and more real, but nonetheless, the scene that I described to you is in that movie. The reality is this is where we came from. And so if you think about that as the framework on which Democrats have been leading this country, we have gone from negative GDP growth to positive GDP growth. We have gone from losing millions of jobs to creating over 3 million jobs, 24 consecutive private sector job growth months. We are moving in an economy where even manufacturing is moving forward. Bin Laden is dead, General Motors is alive, and it is because of Democrats in this country and we're moving in that direction. So I look at what we have done because we are Democrats. We focus on the challenges because we want to make life better for those who we serve. But sometimes in the midst of only talking about challenges, we forget to talk about our achievements. It is under this president and Democrats that not only did we save the country from a Great Depression and are beginning to create job growth, and undoubtedly we have to do a lot more, but it was under Democrats and this president that finally what had eluded presidents, both Republican and Democrat alike, to say that in the greatest nation on the face of the earth, no family should be able to go to sleep at night worried that they have no health care coverage, that they'll have a pre-existing condition that will never give them health care coverage, that a child born with a birth defect would have a pre-existing condition that would deny them lifetime coverage, that a woman, simply because she is a woman, would be discriminated against in her gender in terms of insurance company and pay twice as much as a man in the same category, in the same geography. All of that ended when Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act and made a difference in lives of families in this country. And it was only because of Democratic leadership that we are moving towards that total health care coverage. It is only because of Democrats that the slogan "equal pay for equal work" turned from a slogan and became the law of the land in the Lilly Ledbetter bill. It is only because of Democrats that we have two nominees to the Supreme Court, both women, that are going to be on a path with the next set of nominees, which is why this election is also so important. The United States Supreme Court and its majority will be determined by the next President of the United States. And it strikes me as concerning when I see a court that continuously moves in a direction in which it says corporations are people under the First Amendment and unlocks hundreds of millions of dollars in corporate spending in federal elections, which we don't even know who gives that money, and perverses our system of justice. A Supreme Court that says, with Justice Scalia, that discrimination against a woman based on gender is not protected under the Constitution of the United States. A Supreme Court that has constantly ruled increasingly against the very essence of our rights. The next Supreme Court, its future for a long time, will be decided by the next President of the United States. It is this President working with Democrats that took a new nuclear arms treaty and made it safer for our families and for future generations not to face a nuclear winter. It is this President and Democrats that have begun to change our energy paradigm so that we have more renewable energy here at home, and stop sending $1 trillion abroad to countries that are despotic, wish us ill, and at the end of the day we fuel their despotism by our addiction to foreign oil, instead of creating a new generation of high-paying jobs that creates American energy, fuels American prosperity, creates American innovation that can be sent across the globe. And we've started that so much so that my legislation has made New Jersey the #1 solar installation in the nation, the #2 solar energy producer behind California. We are looking at a whole host of renewable energy sources so that we can move towards breaking that addiction and not depending on those countries that ultimately drive up our gas prices. It is this President with Democrats that have looked at, we're here at an American Legion Hall, and our friends on the other side talk a good game. But it seems to me that the way you honor the men and women who wear the uniform of the United States and go halfway around the world and risk their lives is not just simply by marching in a Memorial Day parade, which we should, or observing a Veterans Day observation, which we should as well. But it is how we take care of them in their health care when they return, how we take care of them in their disabilities when they are injured in war, and how we take care of their loved ones for those who commit the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of their country. And it is Democrats that have created full funding for veterans in this country. I could go on and on. But I'm not in the Senate, so I don't have unlimited time, so. And I'm not filibustering. But elections have consequences. We see that here in New Jersey. We see that here in New Jersey in a whole host of ways. You know, my likely opponent doesn't believe in giving access to women for preventative health care. Cuts assistance to Planned Parenthood. Does a whole host of things. Cuts assistance to education. At the end of the day, the way in which we ensure that America has greater opportunity is by the education of our children. We are challenged globally for having good jobs with good wages and tremendous opportunities. So in a world in which a radiologist report is done in Northern Ireland and sent back to your hospital and read by your doctor here, or an engineer's report is done in India and sent back for a fraction of the cost in the United States, or if you have a problem with your credit card. I recently had this charge on my credit card that wasn't mine, and it was from some bar, and it had one hell of a price tag to it. I wish I had been there because it must have been one hell of a party, but it wasn't mine. And when I called to complain about the charge, I ended up with a call center in South Africa. In the pursuit of human capital for the delivery of a service or a product, we are globally challenged, which means that for the nation to continue to be the global economic leader, we need to be at the apex of the curve of intellect, the most highly educated generation of Americans the nation ever had. And that means investments in education, not cutting teachers, not putting teachers on the unemployment line, not undermining our school systems and our school budgets, not taking out those courses that enrich our children for future opportunities. This is what we see at the state level. Elections have consequences. It's a situation where the cuts keep coming on police, on fire, on teachers, and yet municipal budgets still face the challenges because they're not getting any state aid to help them in that process. State aid, goes down. Property taxes still rise. After 20 years in the legislature, Joe Carrillo's hasn't still achieved anything about property taxes. And this governor, for all his talk about the comeback, property taxes are going up, services are going down, takes away assistance from seniors on their rebate, and says that we are better off for it. And so we have a real story to tell about our successes. We just need to tell that story. Because even in the face of enormous adversity in a Senate, and Frank will tell you in the House, with the Tea Party Republicans in the House who want to govern by ideology and are so driven in a way in which they're willing to bring the nation to their knees in order to get what they think is right. Or in the Senate where we have the unprecedented use of the filibuster. The way the Senate works is one member can get up and object to gives you enormous power. But one member can get up and object to proceeding on anything. And all he has to do, or she has to do, is say, I object, and sit down. Now, all of us think the filibuster is like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, right? Where the guy stands there, and he's on, he's staggering, he's ready to fall off to the side because of something he wanted to stop. That's not the rules. That's nice, but it's not the rules. So one member gets up. The high watermark of the filibuster used in the history of the United States Senate was 20 times when Southern senators sought to stop the civil rights legislation and used it 20 times before President Johnson broke the filibuster and got enough votes. The number of times that our Republican colleagues have used the filibuster in the last 2 years, anybody got a sense?
Too many.
Too many is right, 180 times. 180 times. Why? Because Mitch McConnell says, he's the Republican leader in the Senate, my number one priority, in speech after speech, he says, my number one priority is to make Barack Obama a one-term president. And then he uses the filibuster in the Senate to stop all progress from happening so that failure, the only thing he doesn't understand is not failure for the president, it's failure for the country. It is a horrible political strategy. So that failure gives them rise to success. That cannot stand. So we have a great record to talk about. I'll have a whole host of things to talk about what I did for the alternative minimum tax, eliminating that for New Jerseyans who get bit by it, the amount of money I've brought back to New Jersey for our infrastructure to put people to work, the opportunity to save our life sciences industry and our biotech industries that are at the verge of cutting-edge cures on certain cancers, on the Alzheimer's that took my mother's life, on Parkinson's and certain other critical diseases. We'll have a great story to tell. Frank will have a great story to tell. And collectively as Democrats, we have a great story to tell. What we cannot have is the fear to get up and to say to anyone, this is why Democrats need your support. This is why Democrats deserve your support. And so let me just simply close. People ask me when I travel the state, Senator, what about tomorrow? What about tomorrow? And clearly there are challenges for families in our state. I often have people who come up to me with a tear in their eye and say, Senator, this is the first time in my life that I have been unemployed, and for an often significant period of time. And of course for them it's an enormous challenge in their lives and in their families' lives, but it's a challenge to us collectively, to our society. And I think about where we are headed and where we are going, the investments that if we have Democratic majorities that we can make to both in the short term grow this economy, create prosperity, in the long term reduce our debt, change our energy paradigm, not have our sons and daughters go inappropriately off to war because of energy issues, and I think there's a great future. So I see a rising sun, not a setting sun. This is a country that sends its sons and daughters to beat fascism and Nazism in 2 world wars and succeeded. It is a country that put a man on the moon and created a scientific and technological revolution that still leads the world today. It is a country that looked at diseases that were once thought to be incurable and cured them. It is a country capable of just about anything. And I personally believe, after these elections, with Democratic leadership, our greatest days are ahead. And that's what I hope Bayshore Democrats are going to say to each and every one of them. Thank you so much for your help.